So I want to start tonight by asking you guys if, if anybody has any questions or comments or thoughts about the pre-class video that you watched. There was a lot in there, and the idea of shared identity is sometimes one that takes some, a little bit more conversation. So anybody have any thoughts or questions on that? On complementing.
We liked it.
Who said something?
We liked it.
What part? Liked it. Thank you. Yeah. Egalitarian relationships. I know Ron and Barbara talked about that. Anybody?
Yeah, that was particularly interesting when he had made mention that women can be preachers and teachers. That's what we believe at Covenant Columbus Vineyard. And I thought that was really interesting because basically said that, like you had patriarchal kind of society, and then you have like a couple different kinds of society. And so that was compelling and cool. It's nice to see that, we're both made in the image and likeness of God, there's neither Jew nor Greek, slave nor free, that kind of thing. So that was good that they brought that up. So I thought, still controversial, but I think it's great.
I felt the same way. I wasn't surprised that there was so much emphasis put on it. Just, calling out the equality between men and women and just the differences and how we support each other. But I was really just encouraged by that. I think that that's a great way to start to look at it like that and to have clarity on roles and, just to have something to talk about going into the marriage. So
that's good. Yeah, we really want couples to be able to identify. As you'll see today, we're going to talk more about roles and just how it works to what you want your relationship to look like. There are no rules, but we really think that marriage works well when we have that equal footing in the relationship, and we can know each other and learn each other's strengths. Yeah. Did someone want to say something? Yes.
Well, to that point, I thought that was really interesting because that's, for me, growing up, I had an idea of what a man does in a marriage in terms of make decisions. It's what I say go in the household. So that was a lot of what my paradigm was. And so definitely through reteaching and relearning about what the role of a man is has definitely helped me to understand that your spouse plays the equal role in a partner in terms of what that looks like. And so it's definitely helped to lessen I'm the man, I got to make decisions, or, it's still taking into consideration what my spouse would be saying in terms of what that looks like.
Yeah, it's so good. It's so honoring, to say that, we both have to make this decision. And one of the things that we've always said is, what two Christians would have something come between them so much that they couldn't agree on it at all. Like there's, and that they wouldn't have community to be able to help talk through that if they really can't come to an agreement. So, and I think an ideal situation would be where one person doesn't have to make the decision unless they both agree to defer. How many people know what it means to defer to someone? I mean, I know that probably is pretty simple, but defer does not mean that you, it's not, surrender doesn't mean that you are then under someone's authority. Surrender is something you do of your free will. And so is deferring. You defer because it's more important to them than it is to you. Or you say, is this that important? Like, is this really that important to me? I've always used an example of a experience I had with my husband. By the way, my husband and I have been married 28 years. I don't think I got a chance to tell you that last time. We have one son, 27 years old. And we also married late. I consider it late. It was 34. But we're such different people. And I remember one time I started just talking about something that wasn't done, that I didn't think was done right or didn't happen the way I wanted it to. And we started talking about it. And all of a sudden he looked at me and he said, "Are you sure you want to do this right now?" And I remember it was the first time I realized I don't have to. Like, I can choose to say, yeah, this doesn't need to be decided or figured out right now, or go ahead and do what you're wanting to do because it's not that important to me. I have an opinion, and it's worthwhile. But in the end, I knew that what I was bringing to the table was not something that had to be talked about during that time. And he just really wondered, because we were making dinner, and I remember the thought went through my mind, this is not how I want this evening to go. Like, that's not necessary. So just that idea that you can choose the things that, if there's something that's really important, like a move, or, maybe even a couch, like that, something you're going to be looking at and sitting on for a long time, but things that you need to agree on, you can take to the Lord. We have this amazing resource where you can take it and your spouse can take it to the Lord, and each of you surrender to the Lord. You say, Lord, I want what you have for us. And then you'd wait. You don't push your agenda. You don't say it has to be this way. And then you make the decision together. We'll have lots more examples of that over the course of the classes. But anybody else have anything before I start in on our teaching for tonight? Love hearing your perspectives. And by the way, I am also available if that topic is something you'd like to talk about more. I'm available to talk about that with you. I'd be happy to. I help couples kind of navigate that often in my role here at the church. So, all right. One of the things that I wanted to talk about tonight was the glossary of family system theory terms. Everybody, that is on page 21 of your manual. And I think Ron referred to it in the video, in the first part of the video. By the way, I'll give you a little insight there. That video was, golly, I think that was done in the beginning of the pandemic. It was recorded. And at that time, Ron was the marriage and family pastor here at Vineyard Columbus and had been for 17 years. So he just, that in December of 2020, he retired. And so that's, it may have been confusing, but he was in a role where he directed a lot of things. And so this is his baby, this is his teaching. And so we still use his video because he has a lot of good things to say there. So, but now we're going to talk a little bit more in depth about the family system terms. And I want to know, is there anyone here tonight who has any experience in family systems theory? Okay, not really. So it's something you would learn if you were in counseling or if you were a chaplain in training or something like that. And we just happened to kind of get some exposure to it and started realizing the value that it has for marriage. And then as we started looking at the value that it has for marriage, we started realizing how much the definitions and the way that it's teaching folks to communicate in relationships are the way that Jesus behaved, the way that he walked on this earth, the way that he dealt or experienced people and relationships. And so, like the even differentiation, which is I would say it's the goal of family systems theory. It's the place that you want to get to. It is something that I thought to myself after I was learning about it. I thought, Jesus is the most differentiated person I've ever met. And so thinking about that, you can tie that in with your faith, and this in with your faith, with your experience of Jesus in your life. And so one of the ways that I like the examples I like to give about that is how, Jesus often, even when he was asked a direct question, or when he knew folks were, meant to harm him or prove him wrong or catch him in something, he wouldn't defend himself, would he? Typically, he almost always asked a question and allowed the other person to wrestle with what they were doing and what they were saying. And so, when I think of Jesus and the disciples, or Jesus and the Pharisees, Jesus and the Sadducees, Jesus and his followers, I see him giving responsibility to others for what they are doing. And I don't see him being manipulative, coercive, cutting them off, any of those terms that we're going to talk about now. So it's just something for you. I like to plant that in your mind, because it's a way that you can, when you're learning about these conflict resolution styles and these ways of being, you can think about how does Jesus fit in here? Because we, of course, want that to be the case. So self-differentiation, one of the things on this glossary of terms is that it's never fully attained and it is always tested. So that's a great place to start, is to say, this is not the kind of thing you're going to arrive at, but that you will grow together in. And that is, if you don't learn anything else from this class, it is that you want to always continue to grow together as a couple, as an individual and as a couple. And so differentiation allows you to be a self. It allows you to be yourself and allows the other person to be themselves, and that you stay relationally connected. So this idea that you have to be exactly alike, we're so much alike. We have all these similarities. Well, what we want to think about is values. Do you have values that are in common? So do you want the same things in life? Do you have similarities in the way that you want to raise children, and like what you want to do with your careers, and so that you don't want to try and make someone like you, but you want to have a similar direction that you're going in. That may sound elementary, but some of us can be a little sometimes romantic, and we hope that the person that we're with is going to be everything that we hope they would be. And so the idea of giving them the freedom to be themselves while we're going together towards our future, that's what this terminology and these examples I'm going to give tonight are about. When you think of differentiation, the idea is to be able to remain relational. And that means being open and curious about what the other person believes, thinks, is saying, is experiencing. So differentiation allows for both of us to experience something differently, and they can both be true. We don't have to have one person be right and the other person be wrong. So anybody have any questions about that? Anything you heard, read, or anything I just said? Because this is going to be our springboard. Okay. Okay. I want to go through the terms, not describing each one, but just kind of reminding you of what they are. Identified patient. That's the person who's carrying the anxiousness, usually the person that is upset. Anxiousness, it's your response. We all know about anxiety in our world today, especially in the last couple of years. And so it's your response to the thing that's happened that's upset you. Relational, to stay, that again, that's just to stay connected. Cut off is something that is often used, and it keeps things anxious. It keeps the anxiety going. Separateness, maybe even removing yourself, withdrawing from one another and not being able to work through things. Closeness is a way that maybe things, one person in the relationship can't question anything because it will threaten the closeness. And in their mind or in their family system, everything had to be done together. And so that's another thing that keeps folks from finding differentiation. Overfunctioning and underfunctioning. This may have been a new term. It's kind of self-explanatory. Do you think? Can I get some nods? Like if one person is overfunctioning, usually there's someone else underfunctioning. And a lot of folks recognize this in their family of origin, from their parents, or maybe siblings, that kind of thing. Maybe you have experienced it in your adult life. And so typically overfunctioning is one of perfectionism or dominance in your relationship. So if you think of that, like you have an idea of how things need to be, and so you work really hard to make sure that's the way they are. Sometimes it could come across as being domineering. Dare I say controlling? I mean, we all have it in us, especially when we really believe that our way is the right way. And so sometimes then if that overfunctioner feels that way, then there's someone who underfunctions, and they really just kind of say, well, that other person will do it. I don't have to, or I must not. They might even question whether they know what the right thing is to do, question themselves, and allow the other person to always make the decisions. And so what you want to do is empower one another to have that equal footing in the relationship, and ask really good questions of one another of what's going on. One of the things that we don't talk about much this week that we will next week is when when we're triggered by things that the other person does. So triggering, something that one person, like the husband does, might trigger the wife because of things that have happened in her past. And so when that happens, anxiousness comes up, and we want to be able to say, okay, so this is triggering for them. I want to understand that. I want to know why. Typically, what would you think would be a real, fully human, natural response to someone being upset with you? Anybody have any guesses?
Raising your voice.
Ooh, good. What else?
Or not talking.
Okay, withdrawing. Yeah, becoming silent. Anybody here like to defend themselves? Anybody here like to be right? Yeah. Again, this is just a time for us, to say, oh, I do that. I call it self-awareness. So you become more self-aware, and you can, in the moment, sometimes, I really think that for a while, when you first start doing this, you think of it afterwards, you say, oh, that's what that was. But it's something, what you want to get to is where in the moment you go, oh, I really should probably ask before I react. We call this reacting versus responding. We want to respond when people around us get triggered or something happens and there's a misunderstanding, or maybe there's not, maybe there was a direct hurt, but we always want to stop and say, how do I respond to this rather than reacting? And depending on, again, on your family of origin, you may be a reactor. That may be how things were done in your home. Maybe it wasn't, people didn't think before they spoke. It was, it was just always a defense. I always tell folks that when my husband and I were dating, we were talking about our families, which you do, right? And I grew up in a single parent home, and it was crazy. There was craziness in it, but it was pretty quiet. Like nobody wanted conflict. But in his home, he told me that no one would ever admit they were wrong, even if everyone in the room knew they were. And I remember going, like, what would that be like? That might be kind of hard. And our first 10 years, I didn't see hide nor hair of that. Never came up. And then all of a sudden, later on in our marriage, I started seeing that. And he's just such a calm person. That or controlled, I would say too, but he was light on it, but I could see that it was really hard to end a conversation without, being right. And so we know about it. We get to talk about it, he and I. It's not the only, sorry, I just got distracted by the dog. So again, this overfunctioning and underfunctioning leads to a power kind of a struggle in relationships. And so you want to be able to look at that and think about how that happens for you. All right, let's see, anything else? Oh, the terminology of dependence, independence, and I dependence. Those are really good to, just take those three things and say, which one of these would I most fall in? Am I mostly dependent on others? And it's not a bad thing. It just is. Am I mostly independent? And again, not necessarily a bad thing. Or am I dependent? And that's really what I think what was told in the video. So that can be where you push away from everything. And it's really difficult to be in a relationship with someone who is not interested in drawing close and sharing an identity with someone else. That again, I would say, talk to a counselor for sure if that comes up in your relationship. But all of these can create overfunctioning and underfunctioning relationships. So what I say is that if I tend to be more dependent, then what do I want to do? I want to bring my independence up, and I want to talk to my husband about that. I want to say, I really want to be able to do these things without having to think about what you're feeling or what you're thinking. We can do this, right? Yeah, right. We can. Okay. And vice versa, being so independent that I don't think about what's going on in my marriage or what's going on with my spouse, and just think, I guess if they have something to say, they'll tell me. That may be a little over the top. And so you get to do that. You get to think about it. And I would even say, you guys, ask each other, how do you experience me? Do you experience me as an independent person? Maybe like with your fiance or dating partner, you're very, in the middle, you're in between, healthy, but then they see you with your family and they go, wow, that's really different. And you get to see each other through another set of eyes. And it's really helpful. And of course, maybe I don't need to say, of course, I would say, try not to make it critical. Like when you're sharing with one another, be kind of, be in a way like, what I noticed was, this is what I thought. We want to be careful when we're talking about each other's families, right? You know, I can say all day long how crazy my family was, but if my husband starts, you know, or a parent or something like that, I remember he would just get so upset with his mom over and over and over again. And I would, you know, kind of join in and go, oh, I know, well, that was just crazy or this or that. But there was a line that I couldn't cross, right? There was a line where it was, okay, now you're talking about my family. And that, you know, that's where I come from. So I really do think it's a good idea to say what you notice, ask questions, but be curious about this terminology and how it relates to you. I'm going to keep moving, but, and we're going to talk about anxious systems. Anybody have? I love it when you ask questions about what I say. I really get going sometimes, so.
Well, Kelly, this has been really, really great. This has been very informative. I really appreciate everything you shared. The question that, and maybe we'll touch on it maybe throughout our time together, but just questions to think about. And also, Chandra and I are also going to be doing counseling and things of that nature as well. And so what I was thinking, just what qualifying questions like to ask? Because you mentioned that it was 10 years. And just trying to think about questions that I can ask myself, questions that I can ask her that could really bring out things so that we can address it and talk through those things.
Yeah, that's a great question. I'm so glad you asked too, Lamar, because one of the answers to your question is there's no way to know. That there's no, there's no way, there's no question I could have asked or anything I would have known, because my husband, when we met, was where he was. 10 years later, things had come up in his life. Things were happening in his family. You know, like there were things we couldn't have known. But what we did know, and I hope this doesn't sound too simplistic, was that we both loved Jesus. And we knew we never wanted to be with anybody else. And so for us that, you know, that we were surprised by things. I remember him saying that he felt like I was manipulative, because just so you know, I'm the overfunctioner, he's the underfunctioner. And so he felt some of the things that I did were manipulative. He wasn't calling me a manipulative person, which of course is how I took it. He was saying that is manipulative, but it took us quite a few years to get to where I could say, oh my gosh, he's right. I really want my way. I really believe that these things are going to be the best for us. And so I need to somehow convince him of this thing. And so I began to repent. Okay, so like I began to go to God and say, I don't know how to stop this, Lord, you have to help me. And I began to talk to people. I think I went to some counseling, some spiritual counseling. And they were things from my childhood, you know, from the way I was raised in an alcoholic, divorced home. You know, there was just so many things, but being able to understand that. And so the good answer, or the less simple answer, is that you say, I want to know myself as much as I can right now. What things, and I'll say it again, what things do you see? What things concern you? If a couple is dating or engaged and they're afraid to bring things up because they don't want to, you know, they don't want to have a conflict, because a lot of people think that if you have a conflict, it means you shouldn't get married, you know, which we've, hopefully if you go through these classes, you'll find out that's not true at all. But when you know, like if you're afraid to bring something up, then that's a red flag. Why am I afraid to bring it up? And there's half a dozen reasons off the top of my head I could think of. But the thing is, how can you get to the place where you can bring those things up and talk about them? How can you ask them about their family of origin? One of the things that really comes up a lot is how much time is spent with family. we have one couple that usually helps. They're not going to be here this time. They usually come and teach. And her family is super close and his family is super independent. And so she spends lots of time with her family and he feels neglected and he feels left out. And, so they've had to really be working with that. When they were dating and engaged, they didn't see it as an issue because they weren't living together and they didn't really see how much time was involved. And so you might want to think about that. Like, what are we going to do in our family? One family might be completely angry if you weren't to spend every Christmas morning with them. There's just so many things to think about. But what is your goal as individuals? And then together, what do you want it to be like? Another thing that I'll give you, Lamar, because that's such a great question. I would ask if you have the ability to, or the relationship with the parent or persons who raised you, ask them what they think some of the hardest things about you are. Like, I honestly don't know. My mom died when I was 30, so I really don't know what she would have told me. But, that might be a good place to go. Or a sibling. What was the hardest thing living with me? What was the best thing about living with me? And be able to take that on and not be afraid to say, there's probably some areas I need to grow and I can, and I want to. Good? Okay. If I just keep talking, we won't get to any of this stuff. So, but I will keep interjecting there. All right. So what I'm going to do now, we're going to talk about anxious systems. And actually they exist everywhere. And so it can be in marriage, it can be at work, it can be in your family, it can be, any other place. Anxious systems are everywhere. And so one of the things we want to keep in mind is what you tend to do. This again is where you go to your family or you think about your family of origin, what your role was in your family. Ron referred to some of these, I think, in the video, but we've got hero child, the one that can do no wrong. You were the one that everybody, just was, oh, aren't they wonderful? Or you were just dependable and everyone could count on you. And you actually set an example for others. You might have been the glue, the one that kept everybody close or kept everyone together. And everyone knows that you're the person that when it's time to plan a birthday or there's going to be some event, that you're the one that's going to make sure everybody's there and maybe even that everyone's happy, that everyone gets along. Then there's the healer. So that person, you might have been the one that everyone talked to in your family whenever something was hard or difficult, or just they needed someone to talk to. You were the one they came to. There's mediator, peacekeeper, a peacemaker. The difference between the two is that we are to be peace makers. We can't be peacekeepers all the time. And so when you're the mediator, the peacemaker, you find a way to help folks see both sides of things, to help the people in your family, or maybe with your relationships with your family, just work it out and not have hard feelings between each other. So we're going to do a little exercise in a few minutes. So be thinking about those things as I'm talking about these anxious systems. So what is an anxious system and what makes them go? And here's where I want to go to a PowerPoint. I don't like to minimize you all and go to a PowerPoint, but I'm going to do it just for a few minutes so that we can see. Well, just a sec. There we go. I'm going to share my screen. Okay. I think I'm going to have to start at the top. All right. Everybody see that? Kind of a couple of nods. You see my PowerPoint? Okay. All right. So healthy identity and purpose. Again, differentiation is to be a non-anxious presence in an anxious situation. This doesn't mean that you don't ever get upset. It means that, but it means that you want to remain as non-anxious as possible when someone else is. So you get to remain yourself, but remain relationally connected. Basically, it's hard, right? But it's a really great place to set your mind on. Two people that are differentiated are able to become one because their spouse belongs to God. And so remembering that it's really hard sometimes, but when you think about it, every day you wake up next to God's daughter or son when you're married. So thinking about that, they belong to him. They don't belong to you. And so that helps you to stay differentiated and that they are committed to developing a shared identity, like we said. So anxious systems. First thing is we cannot eliminate anxiousness. The only thing that we can do is manage it, okay? So managing anxiety is something that everybody needs to do, but we can't control it. It's going to happen. And so again, remaining relationally connected during any kind of anxiety. And so this is a theory of just a little illustration we use. It's called triangulation. And the idea here is that the husband and wife are two corners of the triangle and something else is going to be on the other. And so that's being triangulated. I'm going to keep moving on pretty quickly. In a triangle, there's always an identified patient. Usually that's the person who has the anxiousness. So the person that's upset, afraid, angry, arguing, whatever it is, that anxiousness that they have, they are the identified patient. It means they're carrying the weight of the anxiousness. Maybe the other person isn't anxious and doesn't understand why the identified patient is anxious. But this person, in order to move through it, will often become emotional, concerned, or even confrontational. And nobody really likes, some people like that. There are some people who like that, actually. I know of a few, but most of us don't. And so let's look at this here to think about anxiousness and in a triangle. So there's an issue between the husband and wife. You see down on the left-hand corner. And let's say that issue is overworking or working long hours, not prioritizing. One person thinks the other isn't prioritizing the relationship. And let's just stir things up. And let's say it's the wife who works a lot of hours and the man who is anxious about the lack of their time together, or the amount of stress that the wife is under because of how demanding her job is. And so the thing that can happen, I'm going to use can you all see my pointer here? Okay. So disrespect can come up. Your anxiousness can come in the way of seeming disrespectful toward the other person, saying that they're irresponsible, that they're not respecting you. You can begin judging and become like someone who has a highly critical response to the person. You might even be someone who's experiencing abandonment because it's something from your past. And so all of these things can begin to happen between the husband and the wife. So, and actually I would move identified patient up to the husband here because he's the one who's anxious. Does that help? Can we get that? So what are they to do about this? How will this work out? The need that we have here is to get untriangled. And so here's the language. I allow you to be you and to do you and remain relationally connected and spiritually and physically connected too. So I don't cut myself off from you because you're not doing or saying or fulfilling the things that I want you to. this takes control and manipulation out of it. You allow me to be me and do me and remain emotionally, spiritually, and physically connected. So again, I've got here on this slide, be curious about what the other person is experiencing. So if the husband, let's go back to our triangle here, if the husband is feeling any of these things, like he's not being respected, he's not valued, he's not important, or he's saying these things about the wife, then it's really hard to stay relationally connected. So being a non-anxious presence, when the wife expresses her, so I switched him up here, but when the man expresses his concern about the wife's long work hours, do you become offended, wife? Do you respond or do you react in that situation? Do you have the ability to stop yourself and say, let me stop and think what's really going on here? What's happening? Why are they reacting this way? Why are they feeling this way? And then you can come into what it's like to be a non-anxious presence, because, all right, we're going to switch back because I can't switch around all of my slides. Let's say it's the husband who's working too much. That's the issue. The wife has the issue with it. She's feeling disrespected, not like she's doing everything and at the home. She's judging her husband. That's going to keep it over here. That's going to keep this arrow of anxiousness between the husband and the wife. She's going to be the identified patient. She's going to be the one with the problem. Well, that's not true, is it? She's not the one with the problem. She's the one who wants to see some change and wants to talk. So what the wife does is she comes in and she says, what's going on why are you working so much? Tell me what's happening at the office or the plant or wherever it is. Are you happy with that? Do you feel like we have enough time together? So see it's obvious that you have this issue, but you don't make it about you and therefore shut down all of the growth. You can be genuinely interested in what's going on for the man and his work, for he and himself with the Lord. There's just all sorts of ways this can go. When we make it about us, we do shut down the ability to, at least at first, it makes it really hard to work through. So I want to stop sharing my screen here and let's just think about that. If, there's so many scenarios here, but what I like to say is, I'm giving you like an ideal scenario of what it would be like, oh, well, what's it like for you? What's going on? Let's say that maybe you lose your stuff. Okay. Something happens one night, someone comes home, a little too late, didn't call, and you completely become anxious. You become the identified patient. You are mad and you lose it. You can still get it back. You can gain it back. And there are so many ways to do this. And we're going to talk about that in the coming weeks. But the thing that you want to remember at that point is that you can learn from it. You can say to each other, like my husband did to me, is this what we want to do right now? Like, is this really what's going to help right now? Or maybe if your spouse loses it, you'll have the presence of mind and say, this is really important to you. I would just really like if we could calm down before we have any more conversation about it. You see how you're wanting to help each other. There's this difference where, I want to remain relationally connected, even if we're mad at each other. Like there's this, the hair on our necks, it's standing up and we're disagreeing. We can say, this is not who we are. This is not the only thing that's true about us today. This is not the way it has to be. and so you begin to take responsibility. So let's say I'm the wife and my husband is the one that's overworking. In our family, that's not the case, but I can say, I'm sorry. I'm really upset right now. This really triggered me. I need some time by myself. I'm not leaving the house, although I might go for a walk or something like that, but I stay connected. I stay in the game. And then usually, there's like, yeah, that's probably a good idea, Kelly. Why don't you go spend some time with Jesus? And then you come back to it. And you say, what I think happened there was I was feeling this, or I've been trying to support you and I've been trying to think of but I just was so disappointed this night, or this day. And then you can say, I want to know more. Will you tell me more about what's going on? And ideally, you'll have talked about this. I think Cindy and Doug talked last week about not spending more than $50 without talking to one another. Well, talk about what you will do when you get angry. What do you need from one another when you get angry or hurt or disappointed? I love the laughter. It looks like you all are exchanging some things. So back to family of origin. Got to watch my time here. The exercise I'm going to do is have you talk about your family of origin and what you think your role might have been. You may have had, a couple of them, or none of these may fit you, but you're going to talk about it with each other for just about 5 or 10 minutes. And then we'll come back and have a little conversation before I move on to healthy behaviors. But remember, it is usually your family of origin that your roles come from, and they are usually what show up as anxiousness in your relationship as a couple. And maybe even when you're at work, you might be able to translate this to work as well. So in your participants guide on page 28, we've got this little interactive. And so identify and discuss your pattern of connectedness or disconnectedness, your roles in your family, and they're just listed there. It's pretty simple. So like I said, I'm going to give you, let's say, about 7 minutes. And so try and make sure and give each other time to share. You can, and again, this is a springboard. You can just do a little bit now, but talk more about it later. When you remember things or think of things, share them with one another. Okay.
I'm sorry, Kelly, what page is this on again?
28.
Thank you.
Everybody got it? Okay, go. I'm going to start my timer. All right, everybody. Let's try and come back. Love to see your faces again. Okay, well, looks like we've got somebody joining us. Okay, anybody have anything to share? Anybody like give us an example of what they talked about?
I'll go. So we talked, I think we started with, I forgot the first one, the separateness or the closeness. So definitely my family is very close. So it's like, when it comes to being married or having a different household and a family, I can definitely see my family closeness. It's something I'd have to work on. Like my mom, like just pop up over my house and things like that. So she's very close. And then I see Rodney's family as way more, he says it's more independent. Like they're more of the, you have your life and I have my life, and you know, kind of that's how they are. So I definitely see difference there that I'm sure we can work through, but definitely difference there.
Mm-hmm.
And we're both comedians, so that's great.
Oh, you guys are gonna have fun. I'm just curious, that always makes me think of My Big Fat Greek Wedding. Everybody remember that story? How different their family, of course, those were both extreme, but nonetheless, you get it. Anybody else find their role, think of a role that they hadn't really thought about before? Well,
Go ahead.
Well, one of the things that, wait, was someone get ready to start talking?
I don't think so. I started to, it looked like somebody was going to unmute, but I don't know. Go ahead.
Okay, so like, I guess it kind of falls in the lines of healer or problem solver per se, but my family isn't necessarily close either. And I was thinking about it, actually it's come up, you know, over the course of a couple of years that like, perhaps I'm perceived as a resource. So like people come to me, you know, they need something. Or I guess that can kind of fall in the lines of solution and problem solver. And I would say even now that like I gave my life to Christ, I think that it has kind of intensified a little bit, but I do think that that has caused some kind of walls to go up because I don't want to always be a resource. I don't want to be looked at that way. Now I like to help, but so I think in, like in my marriage, like I would want to be a contributor, of course, but I wouldn't want to be the resource. And I mean, I'm a single mom right now. And so that's something that, you know, I have to work through. It's just far as like always having to like get things done, solve problems, you know? And so it's a little bit of a challenge, but it's a good challenge, I think. So.
Good awareness. Do you concur, Jerry?
Yeah, absolutely. I was like nodding, like, yep, yep, I agree. And, you know, I would want to be able to, you know, definitely help with that and be able to, you know, like acts of service is her number one love language. And, you know, I'm all about like, you know, anything I can do to help. You know, we were doing, you know, this weekend doing the grilling, you know, I'm gonna get on the grill and get the ribs and the chicken and the shrimp and all that. You know,
I loved it.
Yeah, you know, like I got you. You don't have to, you know, you take care of it. I'll get the fire started. I'll do all this stuff. And so that's kind of, I want to be able to provide that, you know, and that's very special to her. So by consequences, it's very, you know, deep and meaningful to me.
Good. Great. Now, you know, love languages, I highly recommend the book, Finding Your Type. I'm sure there's online things. It's just such a great way to improve, to grow together. Okay, well, let's move on to healthy and unhealthy behaviors. So, you know, when we teach this at Marriage and Family, we always say it's our least favorite thing to teach. But what we want to talk about are behaviors that can lead to or be kind of red flags to abuse. And so couples, you know, when we talk about a shared identity and equal partners, what we want to have here is this idea that we want to have healthy behavior where there is room for both of you in the relationship and where there's equality. And so what we want to do is identify behaviors and attitudes that help to bring life to your relationship, and also identify behaviors that come from a desire for power or control, neither of which Jesus has, you know, in any way, shape, or form ever says is good. Somehow, in our humanity, we've decided it's good, or we think that it's a good thing for us to have in our families, in our marriages, but power and control usually leads to a person not actually being able to have a voice. And so that also leads to bad things. And so what I want to do is point some things out, just highlight some things. Again, I'm going to share my screen. We're just going to go through it real quick. It's only 3 or 4 slides. And so we've got, again, power and control, but moving from there, there's an assessment in your book, and I'm going to have you do it for homework, but it helps to identify behaviors and attitudes. Oops, I skipped it. I'm sorry. We want to go on to verbal abuse that produces shame and fear. Those are 2 behaviors, or 2 emotions, 2 feelings, 2 things that you really want to watch out for. Whether or not you meant to shame the other person, or whether or not you think they should be afraid of you in any way, you really want to watch out for that. If someone starts exhibiting those behaviors, you want to say, what's going on here? Usually, again, it's a trigger from the past. If you feel yourself feeling shamed when you don't know that you should be, or afraid when you don't know you should be, you want to be able to bring that up. So these are things, you know, any of these things are verbal abuse. Name calling, saying someone's ugly, crazy, fat, stupid, any of that. And I hope you all know that's not acceptable. Making defining statements like, you're too sensitive, you're too emotional, you're codependent, you're too controlling, even, maybe could be it. But if you hear someone saying these things, or if you see someone saying these things, there's something that needs to be looked into deeper there. And we're going to go, emotional abuse is very much similar. Verbal and emotional are typically tolerated more and for longer than physical abuse. And so indicators are withholding, affection, and sympathy. Withholding is always something a red flag for you in your mind. If you see yourself doing it or another person is doing it. Rarely complimented. In other words, you withhold compliments, you withhold praise or appreciation, gratitude. Criticizing in any way, being really critical, that can be emotionally abusive. And especially in humiliate someone, your spouse, in front of others, or if you're being humiliated, that's pretty abusive. And again, it can be unwitting, it can be unknowingly trying to have power and control in the relationship. And so if you can't talk about these things, work on getting to a pastor, a counselor, a small group leader, somebody that you can talk with about it together if you can't talk about it one-on-one. and hopefully a church, at our church, if you come to us, we will really set some things in motion for you. Some churches might send you to a counselor. Sometimes one person won't want to go to a counselor. Lots of different reasons people don't like that. And so you want to make sure that somehow you get some input about this if the two of you are not able to talk about it together. Physical abuse is defined, and this is a really important one, because remember, if there is physical abuse and somebody calls the police, somebody goes to jail. And so physical abuse is hitting, pushing, slapping, shaking, pinching, biting, all these things, but it also can be taking away someone's keys, like making them stay when they want to go. Unless the person is so high or drunk that they can't drive, there's no reason that I can think of that you would have to keep their keys. Or even like blocking them from leaving the room or leaving the house. Like, this is completely opposite from what we were just talking about, right? All the ways you can come together and grow together. This is when things are really kind of out of control. But the thing reason we like to say it is because sometimes couples can get out of control for one time, maybe two times, but when someone goes to jail or when the police are called, things are never the same. And so you want to be able to identify these things long before they get out of control. Let's see. Oh, taking cell phones. That's something that's new in our world, right? Like, the cell phone is such a personal thing. And yet, my husband and I can see each other's phones all the time. I don't think we ever look at them, but there's no reason we can't. If you don't want someone to look at your phone, may I suggest that there's probably a reason, and you need to think about that. If you have an overzealous interest in your partner's phone, that's something you need to think about. It's your thing. And so realize that becoming one means sharing these things and so taking something like that, even any kind of threatening thing, you just want to stay away from all of those, obviously. So what we want you to know is that our church has resources. I mean, even if you don't belong to our church, you can come to us. What we tell couples, I'm going to stop sharing here so I can see your faces. What we tell couples is that this is the time. This right now, if these things are present in your relationship, this is the time to come for help. To say, we don't want this, even if it's only happened once or twice. Folks often say, well, I thought it would be better once we were married. It almost never is. I mean, there's an exception for everything, but sometimes these behaviors start like in middle school or high school. And so they're really hard to change, but with God, all things are possible. So now that you've been here and you've heard me say it, you have a resource. You don't need to face it alone, and you don't need to be afraid of it. And so let's look at the homework for this that is on page, I'm trying to watch my time here, 39. Everybody can find that. And so again, what I want you to know is this list, we adapted it a little bit, but it is given to high schoolers that are dating to find out if there are unhealthy behaviors in their dating partner or themselves. So there's a lot here, but you obviously want to do this. Well, I shouldn't say obviously. You want to do this independently and then come together and talk to each other about these things. If you're afraid to bring any of these things up, that's something that needs to be talked about. You may not need to be afraid of it, but if you are, that tells you something about yourself that you've got some things that you need to be able to get to a place where you can talk about it. So one of them, I think, is texting too often when we're apart. You may just be a really close person. It doesn't mean you're abusive. But if the other person is feeling that way, like it's too often, wouldn't you want to know that and to begin to make adjustments so that they can feel comfortable? That's the kind of thing we're talking about, is being able. So you see how much of what we've talked tonight is about taking responsibility. I want to take responsibility for the things I need to do to make myself a healthy person, healthier, I just want to grow. And if I put all of it on my husband, if I spend most of my time focusing on what my husband, dating partner, fiance, is doing or not doing, that I don't want, that it needs to be changed, then I've got my focus in the wrong place. We are always going to be in each other's, lives. We're always going to be in each other's field of vision. But my focus needs to be, Lord, what's going on in me? Why do I have so much dis-ease? Why am I so uneasy? Why am I so easily rejected? Why do I, and why am I so easily frustrated? I mean, I'll tell you one of the best things I ever learned, everyone, is when it was my time of the month and I could feel that cloud descending, and I could get nods from ladies, and it wasn't like me. It was like I became a different person, and I handled it. I wasn't like a crazy person or anything, but I learned that if I told my husband that was happening, he would hug me. He would give me extra grace. He would realize it wasn't him. And it made it so much better. I know everybody doesn't have the same experience there, but I didn't use it as an excuse, is what I'm saying. And it also helped me to take more responsibility. If I needed to spend a little bit more time by myself that week, because I didn't want to take anybody's head off, then I would say, I need to spend some more time alone. And he would say, do you need to spend some time with Jesus? I need to go do that. I think that might be a good idea. And so I felt cared for and I felt loved, rather than us thinking this is who we are, right? We have good times. We have stressful times. I wasn't my best self today. I really am sorry. So 8:22, I want to open up for any conversation and also check my checklist to make sure I haven't forgotten. Oh, I know. I have one more thing I want to tell you all. There's a great book. If any of you are really keyed into this and you want to know more, the family system stuff, it's called Growing Yourself Up. I love the title, Growing Yourself Up. Who doesn't need to do that? In some ways, I'm stuck as a 6-year-old when my dad left. It doesn't have to define me. It's just true. Some ways. And so how can I begin to grow in that area? Not look to my husband to fill that need for me. Look to God. So Growing Yourself Up, it's by Jenny Brown. And another that is much more clinical, so I don't always recommend it, but it's called Extraordinary Relationships. And you know what? I think the first one is a Christian author, I'm pretty sure, but I'm not 100%. But I know that Extraordinary Relationships is not a Christian book. It's a family systems clinical book. But it's got some great scenarios in it that help you to learn about this. Okay. Anybody have any questions or comments, things you want to say?
Yes, I got one, Kelly. Just the point about relationally connected. Could you touch on that again? Because I felt like that was so really key in terms of holding the foundation of the relationship and checking in place, if you will. Could you talk more about that?
Mm-hmm. You know, it was brought up, it was mentioned with differentiation. And so anxiousness has, you know, we all have a different response to that. Become aware of what your response to anxiety is. If you know that you just turn in, you go inward, if maybe you even can like start to become depressed, hopeless, or maybe you get like really irritable, or you escape into video games or TV or social media or whatever it is, you know, so like you start to say, when I get anxious, when I'm upset, this is what I do to take care of it. It might be drink more than you normally do, or it might be eating more. So then when you find out what that is you do, you say, this is causing me to not be relationally connected. I am pulling into myself. I'm looking into myself to get what I need because I'm afraid I'm not going to get it from this other person or from life or from whatever, you know, my children. I'm not able to handle this. And so I'm going to these behaviors that are not helping me stay connected. So establishing with yourself and then with one another that you want to remain relationally connected when you're upset, then you say, this is what I need to do. So I'll give you an example from my husband and I too. At one point we had a disagreement, and I'll tell you guys one thing to remember. You'll often forget what the disagreement was about. You'll just remember that you were upset, you know, like it's just crazy. Often they're not important enough to remember, but we had a disagreement, and my husband, this was early on in our marriage, he would have to go and be by himself because, very smart man, he did not want to say things he would regret, right? He didn't want to say things that would hurt me, and he knew he would because of his family of origin, where they yelled, they called names, they did all that stuff because they had to be right, remember? So he would go away. Well, in my mind, I said, you know, when I was 6, my dad left, and he left many times before that. And so him going away from me made me feel like I was just like, I was going to come unglued. Like I just thought, you can't leave over this, you know, and he wasn't leaving. And what I realized was that what he did, one time I went and peeked, he went in the bedroom and shut the door. And I imagined him being very angry at me. He was laying on his face on the floor, praying. And that's what he had to do to get back to himself. See, I was trying to keep him out with me to resolve the conflict. And what he needed was to be quiet and to calm down and to be with God. And so what I learned was I could get through it. And you guys, it would be so comical. I wish I could have video of me talking to myself to get myself through it, but I got through it. But the other thing is that while I was mad, I tend to slam cupboards and clean, do dishes, you know, that kind of stuff. And so I was standing at the sink doing dishes after one of these things, and he came back out, and he came up behind me, and he put his arms around my waist, and he said, "I'm so sorry." And I didn't say anything. He said, "I'm always afraid you're going to try and take something from me." And it was like this insight that he had gotten. And I thought, and all of a sudden I had this epiphany, and I said, "And I'm always afraid you're not going to give me what I need." And so we are standing, not even looking at each other, just realizing, you know, like these two things collide, and it's, you know, it's fireworks. Like we want to protect ourselves, right? And so that was just one of those times where it was like the ceiling that we were hitting kind of just opened up. And we were able to say, this is what we've been struggling with for the last, couple of years. And we still hit it. We still hit it sometimes, but we learn all the time how to do that. So that was remaining relationally connected. He did go away, but what we learned about each other was that he always comes back to apologize, to talk more, to resolve it, to pray, those kinds of things. And so we can disagree and remain relationally connected. So I don't know that our conflict that night was ever resolved, you guys. I don't know. But when you can talk to Jesus like he was in the bedroom and like I was when I was slamming cupboards, you know, we could come back and be together and figure it out from there. Just last thing I'd like to say is, you know, what you saw last week we did my parents' marriage. Really, really think about that. What you saw them do, what upset you about it, what you, as an adult now, you appreciate. You know, just know that it's very likely you'll bring some of those things into your relationship, and you can deal with them. You can really deal with them. Thanks again, Lamar. Great question. Well, how about, since it's 8:30, how about if I pray? And just remember, I can stay on afterward if you want to talk. If anybody wants to know about getting married at the Vineyard or our coaching program, I can tell you about that too. And anything else after that. But let me pray so those who have to can head out. So, Holy Spirit, Lord God, Father, we just bring ourselves to you today, Lord. And when I pray that, Lord, you know that I mean in our minds, in our imaginations, literally bring ourselves to sit at your feet, to sit in your lap, whatever we need to do, Lord, to feel like you've got us. And I pray for this class, Lord, every person here tonight, that you would be able to attract and keep their attention as they talk through, think through, and look at these things in their lives. Lord, show them all that you have for them, the future you have for them. Give them courage, Lord, to face the future together. Give them hope and joy to look at what they're going to create with you at the center. Thank you, Lord. In Jesus' name, amen. Amen. All right, guys. So good to be with you again. Next week, we'll have another couple with us. So hopefully we'll have a couple the rest of the time, but I'll be here each time. Okay.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank
You're
you.
welcome. You're welcome.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you, guys.
Thank you. This is great.